Jono, can you please introduce yourself, brother?
Yeah, so my name's Jono Kitto. I was born in Christchurch. Well, I'm 32. Currently living in Christchurch, but I've done a bit of travel, which I'm sure we'll talk about soon. I currently work a couple of jobs. I'm a personal trainer at a gym, and I also work for a non-for-profit organisation helping kids get involved in sports that have barriers that stop them from being able to get into it otherwise. And so, yep, just started that a couple of weeks ago. As well as that, I'm doing a bit of rugby coaching on the side as well. So, yeah, I'm married to Lauren, my wife. We've been married for almost 5 years, and I played rugby
Five
for
years, mate. That's
five
gone
years,
quick.
right? Yeah, and I played rugby for a fair chunk of my life until I retired at the end of 2021. So I think I played maybe 7, 8 years of professional footy through my 20s. Yeah, and so that started sort of academy stuff here
So,
in Christchurch. Yeah, go for it, bro.
yeah, do you want to take us through the rugby journey? Because I guess that's what I first. Well, obviously, I met you at church at Majestic, but when I found out you played rugby and stuff like that, I was like, because I was a rugby player, ex-rugby player, I don't know what you call me, failed rugby player. But yeah, I played. Yeah, like, what was like, going through the academy and stuff like that? How was that? Because Canterbury has so much, reputation.
Yeah, yeah. So it was a bit of a journey. So basically, normally starts at school in terms of you're starting to try and get yourself noticed through school, through first 15 and whatnot. I played a bit of rep stuff there, Canterbury 18s. But out of school, as soon as I left, I didn't actually make academy to begin with. I went and played 1 year for a club called Sydenham in Colts, and then moved back to my home club Linwood to sit under a coach that was sort of my position specific coach for the academy. And he's now doing things with the All Blacks. He's a pretty big deal. But so it was a good move at the time. Little did I know. But yeah, he was sort of really massive in my life in regards to helping me actually develop my own personal skill set. And then from there, I made academy maybe a year and a half, 2 years out of school. And then yeah, I gave it a decent crack through academy. Sort of missed out on a contract because of the year that I had. The second year that I had in academy, I was pretty poor in terms of my performance, and so didn't deserve that, but managed to get something, picked up something north up in the Bay of Plenty, and via sort of like an interim injury cover contract with the Chiefs. But the Canterbury Academy itself was really high level. It was really good in regards to what you get exposed to and what you get given. Yeah, I look back on it with a lot of fondness. It was just intertwined with a journey at the time in my life where mentally I was not in a good space. And so when it came time to that second year that I already mentioned, there was a lot going on in my head that influenced the way I was performing. And it just meant that when the opportunity came along for Canterbury, there was a better candidate ready to step up into that. He's done pretty well. His name's Mitch Drummond. He's still playing there, and it meant that there
Mate,
wasn't
I
a spot
played
for
touch
me.
with Mitch Drummond.
There you go. Yeah,
Yeah.
man.
He's
Yeah, it
from
is. He's
Nelson,
pretty
right?
good touch player. He's from Nelson, yeah. So
Yeah, we played
yeah,
Canterbury. Oh, Canterbury's. I
you
think we
probably
faced him.
did.
Oh, I can't remember.
Yeah,
Yeah, he was solid.
yeah.
Yeah.
He is real solid. Yeah, he is. So yeah, that was the sort of initial journey with it all. Yep, and then off I went up north via Hamilton and then Mount Maunganui, and then it sort of continued on later on to the UK.
Yeah, how was playing in the UK? What was the biggest difference between playing in NZ and playing over there?
Yeah, so the biggest difference obviously is the weather. It's just 9, 10 months of the year overcast and raining, and so that affects the way you approach the game. And for my position particularly, I went from maybe kicking the ball, I don't know, 20 times a season. If the season had maybe 10 to 15 games in it, maybe like a Mitre 10 season, whatever it's called now, Bunnings Cup, etc. To kicking that level of times probably 20 times per game is probably what it was like out there. It's just a different way. So they put a lot more emphasis on the nines running the game out there. That's the position I played, halfback, and because of that, yeah, it includes like managing the game territorially, and there's a lot more kicking because of the weather, and then it's a lot more combative in regards to a lot more forwards running it straight at each other, 12s running it pretty hard, a lot less expansive footy just because again of the restrictions around, well, restrictions probably not the right word, but the parameters of which you're playing in, for a majority of the season, a lot longer season too, obviously. So it's a bit of a war of attrition over the whole time as well. Yeah, yeah, quite physical, big four packs. Lots of kicking. That's probably the best way to describe it.
Yeah. And like, what do you prefer? Do you prefer that type of game, or do you prefer like, I don't know,
Oh,
like
look,
spreading it out, having a
yeah,
bit more
like
of a run?
I loved playing back here in New Zealand, but I really value what I learned out there. So I learned out there a lot more of like game management, tactical understanding, and there was some pretty amazing experiences too in terms of some of the teams I got to play against, the players I got to play alongside or against, all of that sort of thing. It was pretty high standard out there, but I definitely prefer expansive footy. It was more so, I guess, towards my skill set, towards what I was better at, shall we say. And yeah, I mean, who doesn't like just running the ball heaps and passing and trying to attack a lot more, like in general. But yeah, like I say, valued the learnings that came from being overseas for sure.
And what's life like over there as well? Like outside of rugby, I haven't even stepped on Europe land,
Right.
so I've got no idea. Like, what's
Yeah,
life
man.
like in comparison to like living in NZ?
Yeah, like it was a bit of a shock when I first went over there. I thought it would be pretty similar to over here, and again because they had an influence on what our culture's like out here based on the fact that they colonized us at one stage. And look, there's some basic similarities, but a lot of differences, so especially culturally in regards to just the average demeanor of a person, their outlook on life, I guess the levels of activity outdoors, things like that. The biggest shock for me probably was, yeah, I guess just how much less communal they are as a people. They're actually, obviously, it's in England, it's like, I can't remember how many, maybe like 68 million or something like that, in a size of a country that's like, I think 10% smaller than New Zealand in regards to landmass. So like they're packed in there, but yeah, like outside of the footy team I was involved in, it wasn't necessarily the easiest to find community there as in comparison to New Zealand as it is here. And that wasn't just, I guess, my take, but even my wife's take on it as well. And we still did, but it requires a bit more effort. People are, especially if you go to London and whatnot, people are quite happy to pretending that you're not even there, even in regards to like on public transport and walking down the street. They kind of look at you sideways if you say hello and how you going sort of thing as you walk past them. So that's probably one of the bigger differences. But then on the other side of it, you're 30 minutes away from a major airport that can fly pretty cheaply anywhere into Europe, and you can experience all these different cultures at the same time. Yep, there's a lot at your fingertips in regards to that too. So there's huge positives. Anytime we had off, we were sort of traveling and experiencing like crazy different levels of cultures and environments and things like that are just so far away from New Zealand that it would take a long time and a lot of money to get out there all the time if you're going to do that from here. So yeah.
Yeah, I had a similar experience just moving to Sydney. Like, it's not as big as London or
Sure.
like, maybe the countries or the cities that you went to, but even like like even just walking around like our area, I'll say hi to people, and sometimes it's kind of like a game with my wife and I. They'll just like straight up ignore me. Like, I'm like, morning.
Yeah.
Like sometimes I'll just joke. I'll be like, "Yeah, morning," like just talk to myself because it's just I don't know, man. Is it a small city thing? Because I even got that. Like Auckland, once again, still a small city, but from Christchurch, I don't know. Maybe we have more time. There's less to do, or the people are nicer. I'm not sure, but I found that as I kind of slowly moved, like I went from Christchurch to Auckland to Gold Coast to Sydney, that this small kind of climb,
Sure,
in terms of like sizes of cities, that like the more I kind of got ignored or like no one cared.
Yep.
Yeah, like no one really wanted to say hi. And like it doesn't cost anything to say hi. Like I didn't even want to chat to them. Like I don't want to hear their life story. I'm just happy to say hi. You know what I mean? Like acknowledge that there's a human in front of me. Morning. That's all it has to be. Yeah, good on you, mate. Cheers. Yeah, boom. Like I don't know. Did you find that too?
I would say that it definitely plays a huge part of it, especially obviously for London or somewhere like Birmingham or Manchester or something like that, for sure. I think my shock was, there was a story of when I first arrived. I went and moved in with some Kiwis that had already been there for a bit and had their own place, and that they had said they'd gone to their next door neighbours and said, "Hey, like we'd love to have you around for dinner or come around to yours." That's weird. Like we don't do that here. You're obviously not from here, but that's not what we do as English people. Now that might have just been a bad instance, but then I guess I saw plenty of that over this 5 to 6 years that I was there to sort of reinforce that perhaps that is more the sense of the way they operate. And that wasn't a big city at all. That was quite a small town. So yeah, it just a subtle nuance, I guess, in regards to the differences, but sometimes they can have a larger impact than you expect in regards to forming a community around you that you obviously need as a human.
When I first thought of doing a podcast in 2019, I wrote down everything that I wanted to achieve with the show. And one thing I never wrote down was to spam you with ads of products that I never really used myself. However, I did write down that I wanted to grow it as big as possible and have as many interesting people on the show as I could. To help make that happen, all I ask is that you leave a review on the podcast platform that you're listening to this episode on and share it with someone that you know it will benefit. If you want to support myself even further, and more importantly, your body transformation, and are interested in having me as your coach to help you achieve the results that you just can't seem to achieve on your own, you can visit teamrockashby.com to see what program fits you best. Back to the show.
You talked a bit about burnout, and I think, my experience was a bit different to yours, but would you mind sharing on it? Because I think for people such as myself and yourself that really like to, because we haven't chatted in like years, I'm not sure if you're still kind of like pedal to the metal. I'm not sure, but I remember when I like met you, you were like really, ambitious, really focused, really like go, kind of, wanting to achieve this and that. And, I definitely had that too when I first met you, which was a while back. But I ran into a similar thing, like you kind of just keep pushing, and then you just kind of like, mate, I remember. And I've said this a few times, but like I was just like, I'd always just run myself until I kind of like just bawl my eyes out and just be like crying and be like, what's the point? What's my purpose? What is this? And then I'd just kind of wake up and be like, all right, let's just keep going. I would just kind of like keep driving until I hit that. And then I'd be like, I just need a good sleep. I just need to, do this and that. And then I can keep pushing. But yeah, can you kind of talk us through, I guess, and you can share as much as you want or, as little as you want.
Yeah.
But like kind of, like, I guess what that drive was and kind of how you ended up getting to a point where you're like, man, I think this is a bit too much.
Yeah. So that probably encapsulates a larger like story around my mental health journey and some of what went on there. So I'll share all of that because it'll play a major part in regards to the burnout side of things. And so I think I touched on that in regards to where my head was at in the second season of my academy stint with Canterbury. But like you've touched on, I was pretty driven. I was pretty focused. There was a lot about me that was achievement-based, performance-based, push sort of mentality, especially from about 15 onwards until a lot later on. But I came to recognize a lot, probably at around 24, 25, a lot of it was driven by pretty negative emotions. And what had happened that had led me to realize that was when I was 19, what year was that now? It's going to escape me, probably around 2011, 2012, I became really depressed, like fantasizing about suicide level depressed sort of thing. Because of my family and because of my faith, I guess there was two things that were sort of holding me away from actually doing it, the actual act of it. But I had mentioned many times to people I love that I didn't want to be alive anymore. And so, within that, I guess trying to walk out of it on the other side of it, I started a journey of what you would on growing in self-awareness, I guess, by going to see counselors. Other times it was a psychologist or doing a few courses around mental health, well-being and understanding the brain and things like that I started to understand what was actually going on for me. And the drive that I guess was the fuel for most of the go mentality that I have, the achievement mentality, was actually fear of failure and what that would mean, fear of not being loved, probably at the root of it all. And that had been something that I had picked up and learned and adapted based on the way I grew up and the things that were around me in the time that I was being formed, I guess, from a younger kid all the way through to teenage years. There are plenty of stories where I was being affected in a way to believe that the way the world operated was based on performance, that you were judged for your performance, that your worth came from your performance, and that ultimately people loved you or didn't love you based on your performance. And there was more to it than just that, but that was probably one of the bigger rocks of why I was the way I was and why I was struggling. And the reality is that some levels of society act and behave and think and value, their value system is that, like it is performance. Like you go to the work and your job might be based on your performance, like you can't escape that. But to see yourself and your identity and your worth attached to that when you're human and you consistently make mistakes is very dangerous. Because for me, it was like, if I'm not perfect, then people are going to not love me. People are going to walk away from me. People are going to judge me. People are going to misunderstand me. And therefore, the goal for my life is to be as perfect as I possibly can be. So that doesn't happen. And obviously, I didn't succeed at that, and still am not succeeding at that, which then led to lots of stress, lots of anxiety, lots of internalized pain, lots of self-hatred, a lot of self-hatred. I really didn't like myself or like who I was. I go so far as to say, oh, I said this a lot, like I hate myself, I hate who I am. And yeah, realized that was actually something that wasn't who I was, but something that I had inherited from situations. I'll give you an example. My dad and I are super close. Like, he's been amazing in this journey, because he's put his hand up for a lot of what I might share even now and gone, I got that so wrong. And even shared why he got that wrong in regards to some of his inheritance as a kid. And it's been really amazing. It's definitely helped the healing journey, shall we say. But I used to run out in the field, and if I was having a bad game, he had threatened to pull me off the field, and while the game was going, like in front of my mates and in front of the appearance. And then we'd get in the car and he'd tell me I played really badly, and almost if he was embarrassed with me. And then some of those moments, then he'd give me what he described as saying he wanted to give me space to sort of like deal with the emotion of how I played or whatever else. It was like, if I didn't go and talk to him that day, which was Saturday, he probably wouldn't talk to me till Sunday. So I just got this sense of like, mate, I missed 2 tackles today, and my dad doesn't want to talk to me for the rest of the day. And it's actually not funny, but it's funny to think about that now, the way I interpreted it, because he was like, I want my son to have space. I don't want to smother him with or berate him, but I interpreted it as I missed 2 tackles and now my dad isn't talking to me, you know. And so I definitely developed the sense of like, well, I can't miss tackles, I can't have a bad game, I just got to be perfect, you know, like that's. And then again, you times that by however many instances over the course of my childhood and teenage years, and not just my dad, but then I started to interpret other situations through that lens of a transaction of worth based on your performance, you know, school, so what I'm getting grades wise, and then all of a sudden it starts to amplify and multiply, coaches not picking me, whatever else, all of those things then get filtered through that lens, and it starts to just, I guess what it got to at 19 was like so much stress and anxiety around every aspect of what I was engaging with, that my brain just couldn't handle that level of stress, and it just finally snapped, and off I went to a really deep, dark place. Yeah, fast forward through a whole bunch of work. There were some other big instances in my life where there was some pretty bad mistreatment, which had levels of understanding why there was really low levels of actually confidence inside. I was a deeply insecure person. I came across as confident. I was at this stage now even playing professional footy or whatever else, but my performance over the course of my career was very up and down because my internal sense of self and confidence was very poor. And there were some things that I learned about probably around 25 that of what had happened to me that I definitely saw how the links were there that could shape that and had sort of helped me, not helpful at all, but had governed me in that direction. Yeah, all in all, to then say that I was like, wow, there's actually a big reason as to why I exhibit the behaviors and the symptoms the way I do, and the emotions that I feel. And what I used to think was just me, I'm realizing now was not just me, but actually something that I've begun to inherit and then agree with. I'm not responsible for the way I got treated as a younger kid and as a teenager, but I am responsible now I'm the only one that can take responsibility for it now and deal with it. You know, like I actually have to take this and look at it for what it is and go, I've been agreeing with the way I'm viewing the world and the way I'm viewing myself for so long as if that's just the way we all think, but actually it's not. And I need to start to understand that no one can fix that for me other than myself, the thought patterns, etc. And so that has probably been the last 10 years or so of my journey, which led to, last year and the year before, getting involved, working for a place that had a pretty high level of turnover of staff in regards to, including with staff getting burnt out. And there were still some things that I had not ironed out in myself yet. And so I was walking towards that. I'd say that I didn't get there, especially comparatively, not that it's always helpful to compare. I didn't get there, but I was knocking on the door, so to speak, of it, for sure. In regards to I was getting infections in my elbow and having migraines when I didn't usually have migraines, and my emotions all up and down all over the place based on what I was sort of getting exposed to. And again, it was a journey that has, in this season, having left that and come back home to Christchurch, because that was up in the Mount, probably learning a lot about what I need to deal with in regards to those things, around boundaries, around where I'm trying to find my sense of identity or worth that isn't from a healthy place, and then beginning to look at that and go, although again some things are happening that are out of my control, it's what is in my control and what is my responsibility is the way I think about myself, about the world around me, and how I respond to those moments. Yeah, so it's been helpful in the tough journey of what it has been to actually learn and grow a deeper sense of awareness, and then be able to take responsibility for that and do something about it.
So obviously you've gone through a lot, and you're like, I guess it's hard to say you're on the other side, because when are we actually on the other side? Like,
Sure.
where do we feel like, okay, I've completely overcome everything?
Yeah.
But what have been some things that have helped you, I guess, go from where you originally were, like the
Yep.
dark places and the thoughts that
Yep.
you don't necessarily want to have anymore? Like, what kind of helped you get over there? Like, you've talked about awareness and things, but are there kind of like practical things that you stand out to you and be like, well, that really helped me. That really helped me get over this and get over that.
Yeah, like probably touched on a bit of it there, but the biggest thing for me was the awareness of going, if it's firstly that I needed to actually confront those past moments that I had carried, and could tell you, it's interesting, we hold memories, vivid memories of some of our most amazing moments in life, but also some of our darker moments in life. And generally, we could probably recite some of the hardest parts of our struggles, of like where we were sat in the room, what was going on at the time, what was said, where we were in the world, what part of the house we might have been in. We can recite a lot of those memories normally, not always, but normally, because of how much they held an impact on us in those moments, because of how much emotion might have been attached to those moments. And so I guess the good part about that was I realized I needed to go back and actually address them, rather than, I guess, pretending that they didn't exist, or that they didn't hurt, or that they didn't have some level of effect on me. So that was the first part. Like, grieving it is when I hadn't grieved it. I wasn't an 11-year-old with that situation with my dad going, oh, that's actually a really horrible way to be treated, and it sucks, and I should cry about that, as an example, right? You should be upset about that, and it's okay to be upset about that. It was more like, I internalized it as something must be wrong with me. I need to be better. I need to change the way I view the world, which I thought was that I should just be loved because I'm a kid, and I'm just his son. Like, of course he should love me. The way the world works is that I need to be perfect in order to be loved. So that's how I'm going to go from here on in. So first part is to put it back in its rightful place by grieving that process. And that was big for me, of like going and speaking to counselor about it, speaking to appropriate people about it in regards to trusted people, etc., etc. Then the other side of it was to go, well, if that is true, and that those things happen, and that those things happened, and they weren't my fault, and I shouldn't have changed the way I viewed myself in those moments, then I have to stop agreeing with the way I view myself and the world around me now that reflects those moments. In other words, I can't ask my dad to come and change my brain and tell me that I don't have to be perfect anymore, and hope that will just instantly make me better. I actually have to do the work neurologically. Like, I actually have to put some effort in here to actually, any moment that I might interpret as being a moment that's judging me based on my performance, any mistake that I make, I have a choice in that moment to go, this is, I can put my hand up for the mistake. I can learn from my mistake, but I don't have to beat myself up about that mistake or think that I'm defined by it. Those moments had to happen over quite a long period of time of like rewiring my brain, I guess, to see the world the way it was before those moments, to see myself the way I should, which is that I deserve to be loved just because I am a son, or I am a husband, or I am a brother too, or whatever else, and that there's inherent worth inside me, not based on whether I've done something good or not, but just based on who I am. I'm inherently a human, and we all deserve to be loved and respected and valued just because we're human. Yeah, and that took a long time, but the good thing about it is it doesn't leave you in the place of going, it just sucks what happened to me and woe is me. And I was there, don't get me wrong. I think that is part of the process, but you don't stay there. The next part is to then go, okay, but what have I inherited from that I haven't dealt with, that I'm hoping someone else can deal with for me, because it would be much easier. But actually, the only one who can change me is me. And so I've got to take responsibility for that. That part of the process became very freeing, because it allowed me to begin to change the way I had thought about myself, about the world around me for a very, very long time. And it had an effect on pretty much every interaction that I had with the world around me in every facet. So not just sport, not just with the relationship with my dad, but relationships with my wife, my friends, at work, everything, everything. So Yeah, I'd say they were the big two.
Yeah, I think I had a similar feeling when I lost my mum, in terms of just feeling robbed for no reason. And then, but I can agree with you in terms of the fact of like grieving it.
Yeah,
Because, I was thankful for the time that, when I met you, I was like 14 when Mihara brought me into church, and I was a bit, asking questions of life. And, I had dark thoughts as well. I was like, do I still want to be here without mum? Maybe do I want to be where she is? I was 12, so I was just trying to figure it all out,
sure.
and I was like, but I guess one thing that I wasn't afraid to do was like to just kind of like bawl my eyes out. I think it's just because I was just like so young, I just like did it so much. And my brother was supportive, my dad was very supportive, but we were also all struggling together. So I kind of like just grieved a lot. And I can second your statement of like how that helps, and like just going like, oh, that just happened. That's just, that's just how I live life now. That's just a really sad part of my life. Like it is, and it always will be. But I think spending that time to actually acknowledge how you feel, and it sounds a bit lame, like, feel your feelings and all that kind of stuff. Like,
Yeah,
well, in my head, it sounds a bit lame because I feel like it just feels a bit airy fairy and like, oh yeah,
of course.
you're just crying or whatever. But I feel like it really did help me, I guess, come to terms with it. And once I kind of felt like I got to a place where I acknowledged what happened. It just happened. It wasn't anyone's fault. It wasn't my mum's fault. It wasn't my fault. It wasn't dad's fault. It wasn't anyone's fault. Like, it wasn't the world punishing me and being like, you did this, so, we're taking away your mum type of thing, which I used to play these games in my head, just play all these different thoughts used to come in. And once I kind of got to a place where it was like, oh, okay, that's just what happened. And not woe is me, but like, I'm actually stronger for it. And I try to really turn my perspective, because nothing positive came out of like thinking of the other way where I was
course.
robbed. Like I've been like this big hole is now in my life. I almost tried to look at it, and maybe I was kidding myself, and maybe I still am, but it kind of gives me hope in terms of like, well, actually, what have I got from this? Like, okay, like I acknowledge I've still lost my mother. It's the worst thing ever, but I'm stronger. I can help other people through this, and thankfully no
Mhm.
one that I've known has gone through something crazy like this, but like I have developed a certain strength where maybe people can lean on me in times of adversity that they're facing, where I feel like I've got this almost resilience to something that is something very hard, but I've gone through all the grieving that I can feel like I can almost not give advice, but just be there for someone that's and be strong enough to carry that, because I've like got
100%.
this strength of going through something. So that definitely helped me as well. And I think just through a few people that I know that are like older than me, fathers and even, a bit older, I feel like there was this kind of like, macho man type of thing. We don't deal with stuff like that, like crying for pussies and all this kind of stuff. And I feel like the stuff that they don't deal with really gets them later on. Like they have a like a lenience on alcohol. They can't sleep
Yeah,
without having a
right.
beer or having wine, or they can't sleep. They have nightmares or all this kind of stuff. I feel like that might be all this kind of stuff that we haven't worked through coming into their life. I'm not sure
Sure.
if you've kind of like seen that or have that same experience, but yeah,
Oh,
going through it is a massive one.
100%. I think you hit the nail on the head. It's not forced. Like, it's not forced feelings. Like, it's not forcing yourself to cry or anything like that. It's whatever you express
Mm.
your emotion through whatever way, in regards to, whether it's just talking it out or whatever else. But what it is doing, I think the grieving process is doing, is putting it back in its rightful place. Like you said, like, it's getting clarity on, oh, no one's at fault here. I don't need to blame the world. I don't need to blame anyone else. I shouldn't be turning my anger at losing my mom as an example towards that person if that's what I'm doing. Or for me, I shouldn't inherit those moments as if they're speaking of me not being good enough. I should inherit. I should look back on those moments and go, oh no, that was just being poorly treated by someone else who's got their own journey of having to deal with some things there.
Mm.
Obviously, it says nothing of who I am, like zero. And that you don't get that unless you go back to confront those moments. And then if you don't confront them, like you say, you carry these things with you, and I clearly did, that if you don't one day then go back and confront, will catch up on you in some other way and lead you to a path of finding something as a vice. For me, it was performance, ironically, for a long period of time, of like, to the point that I couldn't even play Xbox or PlayStation or whatever it was for more than 30 minutes without feeling like I was lazy. Like, that level of scrutiny on my behavior, which is no better for me than if I turn to alcohol or, it's obviously it's not potentially as addictive in regards, but we know people that are probably somewhat addicted to gaming or pick whatever you want it to be, but that can have a negative effect on you in regards to the fact that it's just your outlet to actually deal with the emotions that are coming from somewhere completely different. And that leads to why I think we ought not to judge as well, because it's like, well, we end up just turning to something to cope, and we all just find our way towards something that might be more accessible in our lives than something else to be that coping mechanism based on what we've inherited and experienced, or sometimes even done to ourselves in the past, that we first need to confront and deal with, and then need to take responsibility for the part that we're left with, not responsibility necessarily for the moments that took place in and of themselves if they were done to us or we inherited them just because that's the way the world works, like you and your mum, for example, but that we can actually then lead that to a place of taking responsibility so that we can do something about it and not end up turning to things that are going to harm us in regards to actually coping, but actually dealing with it and being able to move on, like you say, to a place where now it can be something that actually gives you strength, gives you hope, gives you resilience, and gives you something that you can then turn towards others and actually offer them as well. I think you nailed it.
I think it's so important what you said, how everyone's going through something, because it's easy to kind of look at like the situation with your dad and be like, oh, he's just a bad person for doing that or something. And, that's all subjective, objective. No, subjective. Yeah. It's all kind of, up to, what you think and how it was and, what you think the right method of parenting is and all this kind of stuff. But I've even had instances where, my dad or people in my life did something and they're not stuck to their word. And I'm just like getting really frustrated. Or there's actually, it was funny when you're telling that story, because I had a similar story. And I don't want to throw this person under the bus, but, like someone in my family, so my mum had just recently passed. I was still playing rugby, playing for Sydenham. And we were versing Linwood at Linfield Park, I think it was.
Crazy.
But yeah, like we were playing and like I scored a try and all this kind of stuff. And I felt like I had an okay game. But I was just happy to play to get something off my mind of losing my mum, right? And I was driving on the way back and this person said to me like, oh, you missed a few tackles today. And I was like, yeah, but I was trying to be like, yeah, but I scored a try, and I was trying to justify my, I guess my, my missed tackles and all this kind of stuff. But then they're like, yeah, but if you made that tackle, they wouldn't have scored. And like, man, I just remember, like, I don't think I was as resilient as you, but I just like started crying on my way home, just like in the car. I was like, oh, this is shit. Yeah, I can relate to kind of like, I guess feeling angry, but it's such a mature way to look at it, which is difficult, like to look at it and say, take responsibility and take accountability. I actually read a book, Jocko Willink's book, something about taking ownership. I think it's called Taking Ownership. Yep. Do you know Jocko Willink? He's the...
Oh, I've heard of him, yeah.
Yeah, the Navy SEAL. But
That's
anyway,
right.
I read his book about ownership. And like when I read that, it pretty much just says everything is your fault. And not in a bad way. That whole thing of like, okay, my mother's death is my fault. Like not in that sense, but like in terms of like a professional perspective or like, if you're kind of going through something, just the fact of taking ownership and being like, okay, I need to improve, or like, what is the lesson that I can do? Or instead of being like, trying to lean on other people and being like, it's their fault, or kind of what you talked about before, like kind of like relying on other people to almost fix your problems. That's never going to like result in anything good. It's kind of like taking this like responsibility, ownership of like growing up and being like, what can I learn from it? What can I do to improve? Because that's really the only way. Because the other alternative is almost like the opposite of ownership, which I think is like entitlement, where you kind of think like, this shouldn't have happened to me. I've been this, I've been that. And it's kind of like victimhood. And, you kind of end up in this kind of place where you feel like you can't fix the situation, but other people have to, or you just wait for this perfect thing to happen, which never happens. You know what I mean? Like things often, they say time heals, and it does, but it also doesn't fix anything that hasn't been like fixed. I did have a question, like, what do you think the kind of answer is, or the strategy is, goal focused, achievement driven, but from a healthy perspective, because this is where I'm coming to, because, you know, I used to use my mother's death as a fuel. Like, I'd be so motivated. I'd be like, I want to make her proud. I want to make a difference. I want to be someone to kind of, you know, for her. And then you kind of realize, well, yeah, like, it doesn't take very long, but once you think about it, like, oh, wouldn't she already be proud of you just like, you know, trying to do that? And I'll be like, okay, yeah. But then some part of inside of me would almost miss that drive. So I would almost, I don't know how to explain it, but like call on the dark feelings to be like, push me.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, it's pretty screwed up when you think about it like that. But I almost kind of miss that kind of raw motivation. But what do you think that like the strategy is in terms of like a healthy way to be driven and to like go about life?
That's a good question, because my biggest fear was that if I dealt with the fear of failure, of being defined by my performance, if I dealt with that, then I'd have nothing left to drive me while I was playing professional footy, right? So very similar sort of.
That's exactly what I felt.
Yeah, and so I was reluctant in some ways to go, well, it's killing me over here, but it's helping me over here. So, you know, like, do I just put up with it for a time and then deal with it later? You know, but I looked at it and goes, nah, it's killing me way more than it's helping me. And in fact, it's not actually helping me, because I felt like it was. Yeah, I'm working real hard, but I'm working in ways that are actually really not smart at all, for starters. I'm like whipping myself to just be better and better and do more and more all the time. And it's actually not really helping me. If I really look at it, it's actually pushing me closer to the edge than I should be in regards to my performance anyway. And there's probably drop off because I'm doing too much, etc. So the big thing for me was to go, well, I got to commit to actually, if that's not true, if the way I'm defined, if my worth is not based on my performance, then I need to figure out what is true, and then accept the consequences of that in terms of what is left over. Okay. And so I was like, well, let's just see what happens. The big thing for me was as the fear of failure started to disappear, and there's still parts of me that have fear of failure that still need to disappear. I'm not completely there, like you've already touched on. But as it started to drop away, I recognized I was still a motivated person. I was still a driven person. I still wanted to perform well on Saturday, but not because it was my worth attached to it anymore, but because I just loved rugby and wanted to be as good as I possibly could at it, right? So all of a sudden my motivation was how good I can be, not how can I avoid being bad, okay? And so now all of a sudden it's like, oh, the driving for none of this that I'm engaging with is about my worth or my identity. If I finish rugby tomorrow, I'm still going to be loved. I still deserve to be loved. I still deserve to have worth. I still have a purpose in this world. All of that is still true, regardless of whether I'm doing really well or not doing well at all. When I remove it from the attachment to my identity, then it can become something that I just attack with a level of balance, where I'm like, okay, so then what's the smart way to train? What's the way to actually maximize my performance in the best way, shape, or form? And it never looks like I'm running to rugby as something that I need to find my sense of identity or calling or whatever else that you might want to use, purpose, identity. I'm never using it where then I'm actually, I guess, harming myself in some way because I'm attaching myself to this thing that one day, even just based on one bad injury, can be completely removed from me, right? And so I think I found something that was far better. Ironically, then I believe around 28 onwards, my performance got a lot better because I started to move away from the sort of whiplash mentality of trying to whip myself into shape all the time to avoid mistakes and all the rest of it. So I think the big key to it is going, if I can redefine who I am and actually start to truly believe that where my worth and my identity comes from outside of my performance, outside of being perfect or outside of being better than that person or outside of the things that I'm doing, then when I do go to actually do the things that I am still doing in my life, I can come at them with a far higher degree of balance, of looking at them with a level of intelligence and going, what is the right level of training and what is this, what's the smartest way to train? And then I never feel like I'm not doing enough in a insecure kind of way, because I'm actually looking at going like, well, this isn't adding to who I am as a person. This is just something that I enjoy. And so there are seasons where I do a lot of it, and then there are seasons where I might pull back for a time because I'm not enjoying it as much, and that's also okay too. But if I want to see how good I can become at whatever I'm putting myself to, if I'm motivated by that sense of joy and that sense of I want to see how good I can be at this, then I can approach it with a high degree of health. That is going to mean that I'm probably going to get the best performance out of myself, ironically, anyway, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I think it's such a better way to look at, like, how can I do better instead of like, don't be shit or like, don't be bad. Like, it's
Sure.
like, be good instead of don't be bad. Like, it's like, yeah, like instead of running away from someone whipping you, you're kind of like going towards greatness. And I
Sure.
feel like it really leads to a lot more confidence. You kind of like more putting yourself out there more because you see. So I can kind of think of it. So I kind of explain to you, like, I do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I've been doing it for a couple of years now, maybe 2.5 coming up soon. I'm a blue belt, not crazy good, but like I'm getting better. But like there's this like mentality of rolling. Like when you roll, it's like fighting or, you know, like a 6-minute round.
Sure.
And you can roll with the mentality of like, just don't get submitted. And all you're doing is like defending, and you're like trying to defend chokes. You're on the back foot, you're playing on your
Sure.
back. But if you're thinking of like, just go and do your best and like, or like, try and submit them. It's a different mentality of like, don't get submitted or try and submit them or like try something, like push
For
yourself.
sure.
And that's been like even though it's just about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, like I take that mentality everywhere because I used to also have a mentality of work, like just don't get behind, like just don't like, or like posting on social media, like you have to post every day. If you don't, like your followers are going to disappear. Like, I used to
Sure.
have all
Sure.
this, like all these things that I used to make, like
Yeah.
the same mentality everywhere. And then like now I'm kind of at a place where I'm like, just create and like make it awesome and then just like put it out there. And I end up falling into a rhythm that's the same, but with a different mindset. Like the execution is the same, but the mentality is different. Like you're doing it with a different sense of freedom and a
For
different
sure.
sense of, I think, like a higher level of product or like execution. Like it's just like whatever you're doing is better.
Yeah.
Like if you're dating, I don't know, you're going on a date with your wife and you're like, just don't have a shit date. Just don't have a shit date. Or if you're like, let's have heaps of fun and let's just try and do this. Like it's going to be much better. You're going to be in a bit like, you're going to be more relaxed. You're going to be more fun and you're going to have a better time. I just think that's such a good way
Yeah.
to approach things.
And the path towards that, right, is only done by removing whatever you're doing from your sense of identity and worth. Like, so you can't do that. You can't think like that long term if there is actually a high level of scrutiny attached to, you're placing a high level of scrutiny and a high level of weight attached to what you're doing and going like, this defines me as a person. But if you can remove yourself from seeing yourself from attached to that thing as like, I am a rugby player, and if I'm not playing well, then I don't like myself and I won't be loved and all those things. But if you can do the opposite and go, well, I'm more than just a rugby player. There's plenty of things that I am doing outside of that, but even greater than that, my worth is inherent just because I'm a human. Then I can engage with this thing with far less like anxiety of it having to be good all the time to be defined. Like you can, like you said with your social media, it's like, oh, I can put a post up and if it bombs, it's like, oh, good, I'll just do another one. As opposed to someone who's
Yeah.
so scrutinized.
Yeah, I've done there's heaps of bombs out there.
Sure.
Yeah.
But it's like, if your worth is attached to that, it's like, man, your emotions will be up and down based on whether your social media is going great or going terribly, and it will fluctuate with every post that you do, and you will be essentially owned by that thing until you decide that I'm not attached to it in any way, shape, or form. It's just something that I want to engage with because I enjoy it, and that nuance might sound like, oh, it's as simple as I wake up one day and I just decide that that's the way I'm going to go. For me, at least, it took a long time to go, no, I really am not actually defined by my performance. And that means that rugby has no definition on who I am as a person. And if that is true, then it's time I stopped beating myself up for the mistakes that I'm making when I'm playing and the mistakes that I'm making in my relationships with people. And it's time that I start to realize that I'm human. I can take responsibility for those things, learn from them, and that's a good thing too. But also recognizing that they won't define me ultimately as who I am. There's far more to me than that, and therefore it's something that I can just enjoy and have fun with.
Sport has had a massive role in your life and in my life too. And now you've also, mentioned that you've stepped into a role in work where you're helping people that
Sure.
may not have had the privilege of playing sport coming into sport, whether it's affordability, transport, like you touched on. And we've kind of talked about, I guess, the potential downside of like really exerting yourself and going too overboard with it. But I also have the most fond memories and like some of the best friendships that I have in my life because of sport. And I kind of want to touch on what amazing things sport has done for you, because I feel like, especially being a dad now and seeing other people's kids and just seeing kids at different levels of school, primary school, they don't have intermediate over here, but intermediate, high school, just being real engulfed in devices and social media at such a young age. It's crazy. And I feel like sport is almost like another option.
For sure.
I feel like some of the kids are spending like just as much time as they would at a sport, or even more than, like on their devices, as opposed to being out on the field, learning different skills, mingling, learning leadership and getting better. Like, what role did sport have for you? Because I guess I want to just like, give encouragement to people out there to get people into it. I feel like it's just really developed me as a person, and
Sure.
and you as well, I think.
Yep. No, 100%. Look, I think more and more it has relevance in today's society based on the way society has started to go, or has been going for many years, maybe well before I was born. Who knows? But I think it just across the board does so many good things. We could be here for ages and talk about them all. Some of the bigger ones, though, I think straight away off the bat is like, well, especially if it's team sport orientation. This is also true of individual sports, but even more so true of team sport. It's like you have to learn how to bring yourself as you are, but also work together with people who are different than you and see the world differently and view the world differently and interact with it in different ways and might have different experiences from the way they've grown up, and all. You have to learn how to bring the best of yourself, but also acknowledge the best of others, and then work together as a team. So that's one thing immediately. Obviously, all the other stuff that's pretty clear of like the health benefits of just being involved in sport, keeping you fit and healthy. For me, that was massive growing up. Like you say, keeping me away from things that don't necessarily add much value to your life in regards to devices, etc. But keeping my heart, my lungs healthy, my body healthy, all the rest of it. It was huge for me. It provided me obviously with an opportunity to earn a living for a while, but through that I got educated about nutrition and well-being and other things like that too. That now I can still carry and hold through the rest of my life, and obviously offset to people that I meet and integrate into our lives, my life with my wife and hopefully one day kids and all the rest of that too. So there's that side of things there. I think the biggest stuff is the social stuff that it can provide now. That has never been more important, based on the fact that you can facilitate interactions, and I call them interactions in inverted commas because they're devoid of all the positive parts of interactions with people via devices as much as you want for the entirety of your life, if that's the way you want to go. But it's not the same as physical interactions with people that you can get through being involved in a sport, and that's true of individual or team sports, no matter what. And then you're learning a whole bunch of different values of like being able to be one, maybe even aggressive in the way you're exerting yourself in terms of what the sport might require skillfully. Like we might even talk about, say, your stuff with BJJ or MMA or anything like that, where it's like it involves a level of aggression, but it involves a high degree of self-discipline and self-control attached to it, which is a really amazing thing to be able to learn, especially for guys in today's society, but for everyone inclusive, of how to be in control of yourself. And maybe even say with like BJJ, it's like if you are someone who is strong, how to use your strength not to harm others, but to be in control of it, to actually use it as a protective mechanism to help others, or as something to protect yourself, or knowing when to say enough in regards to being able to get them to the point of being able to harm them, but not as a competitive way of actually, all of those things are really healthy things that I think to be able to learn. And then again, you talk about team sports and respect for referees, respect for elders, respect for coaches, all of those sorts of things, respect for your peers, trusting one another, leaning on one another, leadership capabilities, and all those things are all developed through sports. And I think in a microclimate that accentuates that probably more than most places that you can find yourself in other parts of society, if that makes sense. So yeah, we could talk for hours about that, but yeah, I think that's probably the biggest stuff for sure.
Yeah, I think like the stuff that you touched on, I think like work ethic as well is honed in.
Sure.
If you really apply yourself, you get better, and then you start more often. You're not on the bench, and then like the more you practice, the better you get. Like that's such a basic thing to understand. But as a kid, you don't really get that. Well, we can get it, other places in life. But on the sports field is like an exact, direct correlation. Like me and my dad would go and practice punting, would practice spiral kicks, would practice banana kicks, would practice, goal kicks from the sideline, from the 22, from the 40. We would do all this kind of stuff. And I, like, not trying to say I was an amazing goal kicker, but like it like the more I practiced, the better I got. It was such a simple thing.
Yeah.
And now that, that plays out in the harder I work, the more success I get, whatever that looks like. But it's that kind of thing. And it's like, even in the gym, progressive overload, the more you like lift, you have to slowly improve over time. You don't try to just like double your lift. It's about these incremental changes. And that's a bit more of a mature idea that you may not understand as a kid in sport. But it's like these kind of underlying principles that really help you live a better life, I think.
For sure.
And develop you. It's not necessarily the physical benefits are quite obvious, as you know. Okay, running around on a rugby field for 80 minutes. Yeah, that's of course, you're tackling people, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, working with people, man. I've been in the gyms and like some young dudes have come up to me and asked me about training advice and stuff. They see me lifting and they're like, "Oh, hey man, like I do the bent over row like this, and can you show me?" But one thing I've kind of realized is like they really struggle with just talking to me and just looking at me in the eye and talking like a normal thing, like you said. And I think sport gives you that too. Like you said, it's not like talking on a device, FaceTime, whatever it is, comments, DMs, it's Snapchat, whatever. I feel like it's just not the same, eh? And these skills are kind of basic things that we kind of took for granted, I guess, as kids, just talking to coaches, talking to other kids' parents, going away on trips and tournaments and sharing rooms with other people and having to get along. I feel like it's I feel like it's such a great thing for people to have.
Yep. Yeah, I guess we were lucky that we initially grew up, our childhood would have mostly been devoid of smartphones, right? So we didn't have that.
Yeah. I got one when I was 11.
Although,
and not a smartphone, but yeah.
What were they? 2280s, Nokias.
Man, I didn't even get that first.
But in that sense, you were forced to interact with people only physically. Like there was no such. The telephone, the little dial-up things that never see anymore. But otherwise, it was you were forced to interact with people in a real way. And so we had those skills growing up as a kid. That meant it was pretty normal for us, and it's still pretty normal for us now. But for those that have grown up with smartphones and devices that entire existence, it might feel a lot safer to begin your interactions with people on your phone or iPad or laptop or whatever. But I think the harm that it's doing to you that you may not be realizing is far greater than the sense of safety and the fact that you can hide yourself behind aliases or be anonymous or whatever else that you might feel like you're getting from interacting with people on the internet. And again, so I think it forces you out of that comfort zone, so to speak, sport does, and to develop those skills, which I think are necessary to live a good and probably fulfilled, happy life, right? You actually need to be able to have really healthy relationships, physical, actual real relationships with people, not just facilitated on the internet. Yeah, so I even think that's probably what is contributing to what we're seeing even here in Christchurch, but especially in the Western world a lot, obviously other parts of the world too, rising rates of depression, etc., etc. I think it has a major contribution to that, i.e. cell phone device use, especially as it facilitates our interactions with people, and that sport is can be some part of the solution to that for sure.
So what would you say as someone that's gone through a lot, and it doesn't have to be related to sport or not, but like I guess for like a young man struggling with I don't know, I don't want to say like depression, but like like along that kind of very anxious or like anxiety, depression, like I know it's not a black and white answer, but like what is maybe something you'd say to your old self, or something that you would give someone if they came to you? Because I guess I came to you as a young person as well, and I really looked up to you, and you really helped me through situations that we were navigating as young men. Like I said, we used to meet, I think it was every Wednesday or maybe every second Wednesday. And we had this group called D group where we would all meet up, and it was maybe like 10 guys, sometimes maybe 15, maybe 20, sometimes 8, and we would just get together and just talk. And I found them like super helpful. So I guess, I'm asking if you were, maybe the younger me or the younger you or the
Sure.
younger someone that's going through stuff, like what would you, I guess, modify the advice to today?
Oh yeah, I have said to myself, or thought to myself probably, that if I was to do that whole period of my life again, I would hope to become a lot more aware immediately about what I've just labeled as myself that actually isn't, and then start to be able to take responsibility for that and deal with it by, obviously, like we've already discussed, like the grief process, but then the process of actually going, well, I'm the only one who can actually change the outcome of my life and the way I think and what I'm inheriting right now. And so therefore I can't stay in the place. I can grieve it and recognize that I was a victim at one point in time in my life, but I can't stay there if I want to have a different experience. No one else can fix me in that regards, fix me, whatever that means. No one else can help me on this journey out of what I might be experiencing. And so I recognize I stayed there for a long time. And again, I don't necessarily think that was my fault, but I would definitely look back and go, hey, hating on yourself is not going to help you. It's actually not. And it might feel like it's driving you to better things, but you would be just as good, if not better, at rugby if you actually were really content with who you were as a person, and recognize that you had a lot more about you than just what you were putting out in regards to what you were doing, your output, your performance. That would obviously for me be the major one. I think I look at especially young men today and the challenges they face, and the world probably more so than it did when I was a teenager or whatever, is portraying, probably from a minority of people, but it's amplified through social media. So I don't think this is actually what most people think, but I think it is what gets put out there on social media a lot, is that there is something inherently wrong with you as a man or as a male, that you are part of the problem of why the world is the way it is, and a major part of the problem. And I think again, I'm 32 now, but I think if it was me at 17 experiencing that, there would be levels of fear attached to interactions I have socially as well. So like an example would be a lot of what I might even see on social media is like, especially as it relates to gyms, is the gym creeps, the guys that are staring at the girls and they're getting videoed. And I'm not saying that those moments
girls are blowing them up. Yeah.
100%. And I'm not saying those moments don't happen. They 100% do happen. But I think the way the world has started to go social, like as it was represented on social media, is to say that our expectation now is that every interaction where a guy is looking at a girl is sort of creepy, unless you like that attention because you like the look of the guy. But otherwise it's like, and so guys are getting scared probably to even go to the gym because it's like, I don't want to accidentally cross paths with someone who then calls me a creep just by accident when I was going to rack my weights or whatever. But it might sound like a bit of I'm making a bit light of it, or might be over sort of emphasizing how much of a big deal it is. But in essence, I am hearing like guys are far less likely to want to interact with girls in the workplace. Guys are feeling a lot more like, I don't know necessarily who I am anymore, because I feel like parts of what I celebrated once upon a time are now like part of the problem, not part of the solution. And there's a lot of that swirling around, at least as it's represented on social media. And so the first part is to go, like, there is a lot of bad that males have done and will continue to do for sure. But that doesn't mean we reduce or change the way we view men, or change the way we expect or anticipate how they're going to behave to the lowest common denominator, and then judge them always the same, including yourself as a male. So to look at yourself and go, I have the propensity for great good or for great evil, and there are times where I might engage with things that I do that are wrong. If I actually just am willing to put my hand up and say, yeah, I got that wrong, I'm going to learn from it and be better, again, taking responsibility. But on the other hand, but I'm still walking towards being someone who brings great good into this earth and to the people around me, and I'm not going to let the moments of mistakes hinder that, then you're immediately setting yourself on a path in a good direction. Because I think, again, the overarching theme that social media is giving is that you're not actually capable of that. You're just part of the problem. And actually, there's not, at the very highest extreme level, there's like what need is there for males, and what, even to the point of what is masculinity and what is a male and all the rest of that. And that's a whole, I'll leave that for someone else that you can have a discussion with. But
that's a massive podcast. Yeah.
For sure. But I think that is part and parcel of, I guess, what males are facing today. A lot of fear around social interactions in different ways, shape, or form. And part of it is based on yes, the lowest common denominator of males that have existed, that have done a lot of wrong and are then getting outed on social media. But there are a lot of people who aren't like that too. And you have the responsibility, if you're listening to this, you have the responsibility, I guess, to decide who you want to be and whether you want to be part of the solution or the problem, And it doesn't mean that you can't say there's bad moments where people behave badly and call it out for what it is, including in yourself. But it does mean that you can look at it and go, that doesn't mean that because they've behaved that way and because that's the way males are being portrayed, that's just the way I'm going to go, and I'm useless and worthless. I've got no purpose in this life, and I am just trying to hide myself away from the world so that I don't damage it in some way. Like, that's going to lead to no place good, eh?
Yeah, it's so tricky, man. And to add to even more complexity, like, I guess to add more complexity to that is the guys that, like, say are fearful of going to the gym, or even just looking at someone in the gym, or maybe they want to talk to someone at the gym but they never would now. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I met my wife at a gym.
Sure.
She wasn't my client, but I was passing through. Like, I talked to her. That's how I met my wife. Like, there might be people out there missing out on meeting their wife at the gym. You know what I mean? You're like-minded people. You're both into fitness. You're healthy. Maybe that's the sort of person that you might want to be with for the rest of your life. And you could, like, I remember passing by and I heard her talking about, it was her 30th and she went to Bali or something. And I was like, oh, I've been to Bali. So I just started talking to her. Like, obviously I thought she was attractive, all this kind of stuff. But, maybe this day and age, I would have been like, oh, maybe she's filming me, or maybe someone's going to film me and I'm going to get outed as being a creep because I'm a personal trainer in this gym, like, rah, like trying to approach all the pretty girls. But I was, like, to add complexity to that, sorry, is like, now people are like filming everything too. So it's like, it's potentially that awkward interaction that led to a viral video of you being an absolute creep, and then people know your name, and then, I don't know, you try to apply for a job and people seeing your video and stuff like that. Like, it's just, things are being blown up to things that, and yes, it can happen, but most likely it's not going to happen. But it's hard to say to someone, like, don't worry about it, because they're seeing these videos of people just getting, like, I guess, cancelled and being this bad person or this, this creep, which is, I don't know, man. It's tricky. Like, to navigate that. But I completely agree with you in terms of, like, being a part of the solution or be a part of the problem. Like, you have to kind of decide. And I don't know, man. Like, I'm not old school, but, like, I think, men and women have certain strengths.
Sure.
That are specific to like who we are. And, there's been, like, I've listened to podcasts. There's been studies in terms of, like, men being more, like, to overgeneralize it, like, more, they kind of gravitate they gravitate towards more things and, doing stuff, ticking things off, doing things. And where, like, women kind of gravitate more towards, like, emotions and feelings and language and talking and, that sort of things. And it's like, we can't sort of, like, it sucks if we feel like part of the problem is, like, our strength, like, I love the fact that I love to wake up and smash work. Like, I get excited to come and, like, I was so excited for this podcast. I was so I'm so excited to train later on. I'm so excited to do work later on. And I'm not saying women don't have that drive, but this is part of, like, I guess, me as a man with more testosterone than a woman that kind of has this aggression that I can, like, apply to my work life. And that's not a bad thing. And that's not saying women can't have that either. Like, women can have high testosterone too, have a super amazing career too. Women can do BJJ as well. Like, I roll with chicks in the gym, and they can do whatever they want. I don't care. But, like, that doesn't mean that I'm, I don't know, not allowed to do what I do just because I'm a man. Like, that's, I don't know, man. It's a big conversation. We could go for ages. I don't know. I could talk about this phrase.
I think the key to it is what you've probably acknowledged, is to go, like, if there are some leanings towards the difference, the dichotomy between males and females, you have a ability to either engage with it and to go, we can use the strengths of both to synergize together. And I'm not talking just about relationships in terms of, like, physical, intimate relationships. I'm talking about just in society, to actually enhance society in a synergetic way by celebrating both of the strengths, right? And so an example of that be, if males are more likely to be physically stronger, exhibit that sort of dimorphism in regards to biology, then it's like, well, you have the propensity with that strength to either use it for good or for bad. And there is a lot of men who've used it. Like, you look at the stats of, say, domestic violence, and it's horrifically weighted in the direction of males. And that is true. You can't deny that. But there is also, it doesn't mean that strength is bad or physical strength is bad, or like you're probably saying, what it does mean is that it needs to be utilized in the right way with a degree of self-discipline and self-control. And that's where the responsibility of males comes in, of what we're talking about with men, is like take responsibility for that, to go, how can I use this synergetically in partnership with females to allow it to be something that is really good. And like you said, doesn't mean that women can't be strong either. That's not what's being, but we're talking here about some of the exhibits perhaps of behavioral differences and biological differences that are proven through science or whatever else in regards to the sexes. And I think that's probably the way to look at it, is to go, you do as a male, young male, although you might be hearing some things that counter to this, you do have the propensity to actually add value in all walks of life that you engage with, because of what you've inherited with your X and Y chromosome. And not just because of that, because of other things too, of just your nature and your temperament and all the other things, but that included, not excluded. And that has the propensity to bring good as much as anything else does, your ENFJ or your whatever else, your personality profiles, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think that's the key to it. And again, that coming back to sport, that's why things like BJJ are good, because it's like you're learning how to take a level of self-control and discipline over yourself and your body to know when to use that aggression for good and when not to, and then be in control of that. And the things that generally tip us over that scale, we're talking about, say, if we're talking about domestic violence as an example of where it's used for in bad ways, generally is unresolved traumatic experiences in your life that you have allowed to fester, that have altered the way you view yourself in the world, that then makes you think that anger is my way of expressing my frustration or my pain. And therefore anger takes the lid off any form of control that you had around your physicality, and then you're using it in a way to actually demean and hurt others. And it might be females, it might be males, it might be children, doesn't matter, it might be yourself. And I think to tie that all in, it's like, if you can then understand that perhaps some of the mistakes that you've been making, the bad things that you've been doing, have actually been a symptomatic, or even some of the anxiety or high levels of stress or depression that you're experiencing are symptomatic expressions of what's going on at a deeper level. If you can start to discover the stuff that's deeper down inside yourself, the belief system that you carry about yourself and the world around you, that is actually the cause of those symptomatic expressions that you're experiencing at the top surface level. If you can deal with that, it's going to go a long way into making, molding you into a person that is actually helpful and beneficial to the world around you, the people around you, everything else. But to do that takes a level of responsibility of going, it's not that person's fault anymore. It might have been 20 years ago, as with the case with my story, but it's not their fault anymore that I'm behaving like this. It's actually mine, because I got to take responsibility for the fact that I'm making these choices in the here and now. Yeah.
I love it, man. Let's wrap it up there. Before I go, I want to say, I don't want this to be cheesy at all, but like, man, thanks so much for. So I kind of touched on, like, when I first met you, I was, going through a lot of stuff, and that, like, just, knowing you, being around you, and even though, as I know now, you were dealing through a lot of stuff when I met you, but you helped me through a lot, not just, the stuff that I was going through with my mum, but kind of, growing up as a man and talking about similar things that you're talking about, like, okay, like, am I going to be helpful to society as a person? Because I was still asking a lot of questions, not just around my mum, but around what I'm going to do with my life. I was like 14. I thought I liked rugby, but then I started to do singing, and then I thought I was, I thought I was a singer, then I thought I was a songwriter, then I was like, I was kind of just like figuring it out, but you really helped kind of like, it doesn't really matter what you do, kind of like, as long as you're, a good person, and like, even if you're going through stuff, I can help you deal with it. Like, you really helped me and my close circle of friends that, we all went to church together. Like, you really helped guide us. We really looked up to you and admired you, and how you kind of encouraged us, because it is difficult, like, whether your dads are around or not, or they just work a lot, or, you hear things left and right, to kind of have, I think, people to kind of, you can call them mentors. I don't know, wiser people than you are, but like, we definitely saw you as this person that could really help. Even though the age difference wasn't massive, we kind of saw you as this like really wise, mature person, and we really trusted you, and like, we were so stoked that we were part of that community or circle of friends, or just like knowing you. And yeah, man. So Thanks a lot, man. I really appreciate everything that you kind of like spoken to us and pushed us and encouraged us. And I think it really helped me develop like a sense of confidence and self-efficacy that like whatever I do, even if I screw up, it doesn't matter. And just go for it. And I felt really empowered, which was cool because obviously losing my mother, they're kind of that nourishing, kind of make you feel good, like pat on the back type of voice. And when I lost that, I guess I was always searching for it. And that's why I kind of originally went to church. And yeah, man. So yeah, not to get too deep, but yeah, I appreciate it, man. It was really awesome. So thank you very much.
Appreciate it, bro.
Yeah. Is there anything? Nah, you're welcome.
Go on, you're all good.
I was just gonna say, is there anything like you wanna like, or is there any direction you want to send people? Do you want them to like check out your Instagram if they wanna like? I know you're like rugby coaching, but you're also personal training in Christchurch. Do you want to like send them there or anything like that? Do you want to just be like awesome, or like how do you want to wrap it up?
Look, honestly, well, firstly, thanks for those very kind words. It was a real cool time of both our lives, and like you said, I was probably in exactly the same place as you guys. And I think the cool part of all of that season was that it didn't require me to be put together in order to some way paint myself as like a better version of what you guys are trying to become, or something horrible like that. But literally just what I felt was like I could be myself and my honest, vulnerable self with you guys, and in some way that would enable you to do the same, and then we'd all actually just be on the same level, walking life out together. And I think, yeah, I learned a lot from that period of time in my life, and value all of those interactions and those relationships with all you guys massively for what it gave me, as much as you might have suggested it gave you guys something. So yeah, it was a very cool time, and yeah, I appreciate all you guys a whole bunch, man, and have missed you guys over the last season of life, where it's taken us in different directions, different parts of the world and whatnot, for sure. In terms of we're wrapping this up and where I want to look, I probably should caveat and say, look, some of my story obviously involves mental health struggles and whatnot. It doesn't make me a mental health expert by any stretch of the imagination, and what goes with anything I've said today, like, you have to take it with a grain of salt. But a lot of my journey I discussed, I was heading towards counsel. I went to counseling, went to see a psychologist, and various other things through that period of time in my life. And if you are going through stuff like that, it can be a helpful first step to find someone that you can trust to actually open up to them about how you're going, if you are in a place of struggle, a trusted person or a paid professional or whatever else. And then in regards to, if you're interested in getting trained, for sure, hit me up on Instagram. But I'm happy to just help in any way, shape, or form I can. Instagram's a pretty new thing for me. It wasn't something that I had while I was playing rugby. Have sort of engaged with it a little bit now, just because of being in PT. But I enjoy being able to impart some form of what I might have learned over the time or experienced over the time to others, to help them. And so that includes PT work. Obviously, I was trained by S&C coaches through my rugby stuff, so I have a level of exposure there. And then with my rugby coaching, a lot of halfback specific stuff too. There's some resource there that I'm happy to share if I can, for sure. So you can hit me up there. Absolutely. No Facebook. Yeah, I again have tried to avoid social media as much as possible until very recently. So
fair play. All right, man. Thanks so much for jumping on.